check. Cordless mic check. Cordless mic check. Cordless mic check. Cordless mic.
Welcome to Houston Oasis, and we can all take a seat. We'll get started here. My name is Ted Andrews, and I'm the MC for today. And typically, we open the morning meeting by highlighting one of our 5 core values. And today, I'd like to highlight the bottom one there: be accepting and be accepted. And I had a few thoughts about that one, so I'll just read them here. A few days ago, I was having an email discussion with some friends of mine. It started with one of them mentioning Bud Light's recent expression of tolerance towards transgenders, and he wondered if George Soros was behind it in order to distract people from the real issues facing society. I replied that seemed a little far-fetched. Then he mentioned a country music song which criticizes Garth Brooks for serving Bud Light in his bar and says Garth is too damn woke. Well, I kind of tuned out about that time, and it sent me off on a thought tangent about how conservatives and progressives both seem to have trouble trouble defining just what woke means. It dawned on me that a synonym for the term woke might be tolerant. And I think conservatives and progressives might both agree on that definition. At any rate, I think tolerance is also a definition of today's highlighted core value, namely be accepting and be accepted. It's about tolerance. Okay, we have a great lineup for you guys today. For music, we have a familiar face and a very popular musician, Mr. Hank Woji. And for our main talk, we have Dr. Caleb Lack. He goes by Caleb. And he's a clinical psychologist with several books to his name. And he'll be giving a talk on the true value of skepticism. And as we were saying, he's got an audience here that's pretty open to skepticism, I think. So without more, we'll kick off the morning meeting with two songs from from Mr. Hank Woji.
Good morning. Oh, that's a little hot. Take that down a bit. So I think this is a good song to start off the day with. Song for all of us. Come here today, talk about family. Come here today, talk about home. Brothers and sisters, bring this together. We're all seeking shelter from the same stone. Now some would divide us, false words and confusion. Some prey on our fears, try and lead us astray. That's just illusion. We are united. We're all seeking truth. Let truth guide our way. Mother of exiles, torch held on high, a light of hope for all to see. Give us your homeless, your tired and your poor, all those who yearn to be free. We got to start building bridges, start tearing down walls. It's time to start building bridges, start tearing down walls. Come here today to talk about forgiveness. We come here today to talk about love. Brothers and sisters, we must come together and lift up our hearts with a light from above. Sweet Lady Liberty, torch held on high, a golden light for all to see. We are your homeless, your tired and your poor. Here we learn what it means to be free. We got to start building bridges, start tearing down walls. It's time to start building bridges, start tearing down walls. We got to start building bridges, start tearing down walls. It's time to start building bridges, start tearing down walls. So I always forget to do this. People always have to remind me. So the songs I'm playing this morning are from a new record that is coming out September 1st. I worked on it for about 3 years. A lot of recording was done here in Houston and around the country. I recorded in 15 different recording studios. And I do have some advanced copies here if anybody's interested. If you like what you're hearing, you can be the first one on your block to have a copy of it. It won't be officially released till September 1st. So here's one of the songs from it. I decided to do a few covers. This is a town song. There's no stronger wind than the one that blows down a lonesome railroad line. No prettier sight than looking back on a town you left behind. And there's nothing that's as real as a love that's in my mind. Close your eyes, I'll be here in the morning. Close your eyes, I'll be here for a while. Now there's lots of things I'd like to see, really like to see. Like to lean into the wind, tell myself I'm free. But your softest whispers are louder than the highways call to me. Close your eyes, I'll be here in the morning. Close your eyes, I'll be here for a while. All the mountains and the rivers, valleys can't compare to your blue-lit dancing eyes and yellow shining hair. Oh, I could never hit the open road and leave you lying there. Close your eyes, I'll be here in the morning. Close your eyes, I'll be here for a while. So lay your head back easy, love. Close your crying eyes. I'll be laying here beside you when the sun comes on the rise. I'll stay as long as the cuckoo wails and the lonesome blue jay cries. Close your eyes, I'll be here in the morning. Close your eyes, I'll be here for a while. Close your eyes, I'll be here in the morning. Close your eyes, I'll be here for a while.
Thank you, Hank. That's a great way to open the morning. And before we get started with our main speaker, I'd just like to mention two short announcements. One, on 2 August, the Houston Oasis Book Club will be meeting to discuss the book Behave by Robert Sapolsky. It's a very interesting book, basically the nuts and bolts of how the brain determines human behavior. And then on August 5th, we have bar night. That'll be meeting at Poor Behavior on Travis Street in downtown Houston. And if you need more information, you can see the Houston Oasis barista back there, Jacob Atchison. Okay, and I think we're ready for our main talk with Dr. Lack.
Good morning, everyone. Everyone able to hear me okay? I can just start yelling if needed. So I'm used to yelling at people. I teach college, so it's fine. Thank you so much for having me here today. I cut out. Oh, there we go. Thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to come down. It's a little more humid than I'm used to up in Oklahoma. It's like the same level of heat, but you all have an ocean by you. So there's a lot more water in the air. So I have to take extra drinks from my cup here. So today, what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about skepticism and kind of the values of skepticism. For those of you who don't know kind of who I am, I'm a professor, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I do a lot of writing and work in the area of critical thinking. How do we improve thinking? How do you make sure that people are able to think more critically? I don't know if any of you have ever run into someone who doesn't use critical thinking. Maybe once or twice. We had a nice example up here of the I'm angry because a corporation is doing something that makes them money, or a singer is singing about things. So to me, what I really like to talk about is what the word kind of skeptic is first. So all of us probably have something in mind when we think of the word skeptic, right? So when you just hear skeptic, some sort of picture probably pops into your mind, some sort of idea. Maybe it looks like one of these fellows up here, right? Like sort of like, I don't know. And to me, it's very important to define our terms before we start really talking about them, because otherwise we don't have what's called a shared operational definition. Because it turns out the way that I think about skeptic and skepticism is not how everybody thinks about it, especially if you're not what I would consider a skeptic, right? So what I really am talking about here in terms of skepticism as a positive value is being a scientific skeptic, because it turns out there's different kinds of skeptics. So a scientific skeptic is somebody who, first of all, demands evidence for claims. So if someone makes the claim, I don't just go, I believe you. Why? Because I believe in you, right? Or because you're an authority figure, or because I like you, or because you're, pretty or popular or whatever. No, if you make a claim, the first thing that I, as a scientific skeptic, do is say, that's great. What do you have to back that up, though, right? Like, what's the evidence for said claim? And the next thing that we do as scientific skeptics is when someone gives us their evidence and they say, hey, here's why I believe that, the QAnon conspiracy is real, right? Or I believe that the 2020 election is stolen or whatever. They say, here's my evidence. I then say, okay, well, let me actually examine that evidence from a scientific method perspective. Meaning I don't just go, oh, it's evidence, right? Oh, it's on the web, right? Or, Gwyneth Paltrow said it on Goop, so it must be true, right? No, I say, okay, well, what's that evidence? Let's actually look at it.
Yes.
But a skeptic is not a cynic. Sorry, I broke this one. So a skeptic is not the same thing as a cynic. Now, if you're not a scientific skeptic, a lot of the time what happens is you conflate skepticism and cynicism. So a cynic is someone who doesn't examine evidence, who has a belief, stays with that belief, doesn't bother to change that belief. And instead just keeps whatever it is that they believe. A lot of times in the scientific literature, we refer to these folks as denialists. Right? So climate change deniers, right? It used to be like in mainstream journalism, they would say things like climate change skeptics. The New York Times started changing that about 4 years ago and really using the term denial because that's what it is. It's not skepticism, it's denial. So we have things like, election deniers, right? Climate change deniers. And those are cynics. Those are not skeptics. Because a good skeptic is open to new ideas. So a good scientific skeptic actually has to walk a fine line between openness and closedness. Meaning I'm open to new ideas, but not so open that my brain falls out. Right? I have to, again, balance, hey, I'm willing to change. I'm willing to change my beliefs. I'm willing to change my stance on this topic. But I'm only going to do so if you actually have good evidence to support this new belief or this change in beliefs, as opposed to just, let's say, authoritarian dogma or, a really, really flashy web page or something like that. So when I say skeptic, this is what I mean. Right? I'm meaning a scientific skeptic. So is this what most people think of kind of outside of this room when they hear the term skeptic, though? It's not. It's usually much more something like cynic, right? And so with that kind of understanding comes a lot of other ideas or terms that might be activated in your brain when I say the word skeptic. So what do you all think about when I say skeptic? Like what sort of terms or words might come to mind? Neck beard, there we go. I shaved my neck beard this morning so no one would comment on it. Okay, what else? Yeah, very argumentative, right? Doubtful, okay. pessimistic, suspicious. No one is listing very positive words right now, right? Like no one is saying, you know, like, here are some really great traits that come to mind. But you're all correct in that those are terms that are often associated with the word skeptic. Now, there can be other nuns too, right? Maybe wise. No one said wise. Enthusiastic. No one said enthusiastic. Determined, kind of, maybe with argumentative, maybe a little bit on that. It turns out, though, that the terms you all threw out, the negative terms, are the ones that more easily spring to mind. And they spring to mind really because that's what our society has associated with skepticism. Not these other words, which I'm guessing if I asked you to describe the people in the room with you right now, we'd have more of these. You wouldn't be pointing at each other being like, argumentative, suspicious. Some of you might. But hopefully more of you would be saying things like creative, generous, kind, loyal, trustworthy. Because you can be all of these wonderful things and still be a scientific skeptic. I know a lot of times when I do debates and things like that, I will have people kind of on the opposite side of me, let's say the non-scientific side, come up and tell me just how nice I seemed. Like they're surprised. Like I was going to come up there and just be like the world's worst human because I embrace reason and skepticism as opposed to dogma. So one of the big ones that we see associated with the word skeptic is actually arrogance. None of you said that, but I think a lot of you probably felt a little too arrogant to say it. You didn't want to get it out there, right? You didn't want to put it out there in the world. But it's true. It turns out if you actually look at the combinations of these words, what adjectives often come up with skeptic, you get arrogant a lot more than you do anything else. But what's really, really interesting is that arrogance, as we'll see, is actually the exact opposite of being a good scientific skeptic. What does arrogant mean, though? What does arrogant mean? Well, if we go to our dictionaries, it says having an exaggerated sense of one's own importance or abilities. That's what arrogance is. Someone coming off as haughty, right, presumptuous, imperious, superior, which matches a lot of the things that you all said earlier about words that you associate with skepticism. And a lot of people associate that idea of arrogance with skeptics, but it's not just non-skeptics, right? It's not just the religious, it's not just denialism that associates arrogance with skepticism. Arrogism is a new word I just made up in case anyone's paying attention. Feel free to use that. Turns out there's a lot of people in kind of the humanistic, scientific, skeptical world that also think skeptics are arrogant. And these are just a few little examples I pulled from the web from the last few years of people saying, oh, I'm not a skeptic anymore. You're too arrogant. You're too, haughty. You're dismissive. You're et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we actually see a number of people kind of rejecting this term, skepticism, or being a skeptic, because they think, oh, well, skeptics are all arrogant. And again, this is people in the world of skepticism. Now, has anyone in this room Ever met a scientific skeptic who might be a little arrogant? It's okay. You can put those hands up. We all have. Some of you are like, yes, I live with one. Some of you are like, yes, that's my friend I sat next to at Oasis on Sunday mornings. Like, it's fine. Like, it's okay. We can embrace that a little bit. We can be open about that. And there's nothing wrong with being a skeptic who is solid in their beliefs, right? Meaning they have what we would call well-justified beliefs. But sometimes that does get mistaken for arrogance, and sometimes that comes off as being arrogant, especially if you don't embrace what I'm going to talk about in a minute in terms of skepticism. So again, there's a lot of people out there who associate these terms together. But what I would have you all think about is that it turns out there are different kinds of skeptics, right? What I've been talking about right now is what's called a scientific skeptic, somebody who's open to new ideas, right? Somebody who demands evidence for claims, someone who is willing to hear new things, but they want to examine that evidence from a kind of a rational, logical standpoint. But there are, it turns out, different kinds of skeptics. So they're what we call pathological skeptics. And these more pathological skeptics, actually this tends to be who's more arrogant, who comes off more as, I already know everything, I'm unwilling to change, to examine new evidence. And the very first thing that they are displaying would be close-mindedness. So, who in here has ever met someone who's close-minded? Yeah, we all have, let's be honest. We've all interacted with humans, right? What sort of descriptors do you think of when you think of somebody who's close-minded? How would you describe someone who's close-minded? Non-curious. Okay, great. So a lot of those sound pretty similar to what you all, when I said skeptics, came up with. Which is why I'm saying there's different kinds of skeptics. There's the scientific skeptics, which are folks like you all, it turns out, who embrace reason and rationality in order to try and form their beliefs. But then there's also these closed-minded skeptics who really are just displaying these kinds of intense forms of cynicism, right? Very cynical, oftentimes, not willing to engage with other people who have different types of beliefs, not willing to consider that they might be wrong, and even when presented with information that shows that they're wrong, they just kind of go, nuh-uh, and then we're done. Now, I don't know if anyone here, am I in a bad spot? Oh, you're streaming. Okay, I'm sorry. How many of you have ever argued with someone on the internet before? Okay, even more hands. Nice. Good job. Let's try that. All right. Hear that? Is that okay? Talking that. So some of you have argued online with people before. We've all done it, right? How many of you have literally shown someone exactly why they're wrong during your online arguments? You're like, you're literally factually wrong. Here's the correct information. All right, yeah, my boys have, certainly. How many times did that change what they thought. Yeah, if it's not 0, it's pretty darn close, right? I mean, maybe like a 1/10 of a millionth of a percent or something. Very few people will see, like, here's how you're factually wrong, and go, you know what? Wow, I can't believe that. Thank you for correcting me. Like, that's not, it turns out, what people do. Because most people, when you factually correct them, it turns out they don't like it. Because they're not displaying open-mindedness. They're displaying more closed-mindedness and cynicism. And so whether you're talking about, just someone that you might interact with in any kind of realm, politics, religion, or whatnot, or someone who goes more into the far kind of conspiracy areas, more climate change deniers, whatever you want to say, they don't tend to be actually scientific skeptics, right? They're being much more of these pathological skeptics. And so that means, what a good skeptic looks like, a scientific skeptic looks like, is very different. Because again, scientific skeptics are open to new ideas. Right? I'm a clinical psychologist. I specialize in severe anxiety disorders like obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress, things like that. And so I'm constantly consuming new scientific literature that's coming out about those things. And sometimes, relatively frequently, older ideas, older studies are overturned. And we have to change what we think about. We have to change how we do treatment, for example. And if I was not open to new ideas, my patients wouldn't get the best possible care based on the knowledge that we have right now. If I was a cynic about these things, the things that I learned in graduate school just 20 years ago, some of those now we know not so accurate. And so a good scientific skeptic has to keep up with these new ideas and then be willing to change when presented with good evidence. Because if you're not, you're more on that cynicism side. You're on that denialism side. And so with a good kind of mindset, it turns out you're actually displaying the exact opposite of arrogance, right? The exact opposite of what so many people accuse scientific skeptics of doing. And you're actually displaying, if you're a good scientific skeptic, a very specific type of humility. Now, a lot of us, particularly those of us who come from religious backgrounds, associate humility with a religious mindset. How many of you would do that? Would think like, oh yeah, you've heard that term in a religious sort of setting before, people being, often we hear it like humble before God or things like that. That's not the kind of humility I'm talking about. So if you look at this definition, a modest or low view of one's own importance, that's not the kind of humility I'm talking about, right? I'm not saying that as a scientific skeptic, you need to be like, I'm trash, right? I don't know nothing, I'm worthless. No, but instead, we want to talk about a different kind of humility. Now again, it's not this kind of humility either, right? It's not this kind of religious, I have to, humble myself before you, divine power, because I'm a worthless worm. We're not talking about that at all. I'm talking about the kind of humility that people like Richard Feynman discuss, I can live with doubt and uncertainty. I think it's much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers which might be wrong. So what I'm talking about is this kind of humility, which is the humility that a scientific skeptic displays, which is what we would call intellectual humility. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. And I'm okay with not knowing everything. And I'm especially okay with not pretending to know things that I actually don't know, which is what we would really define arrogance as, right? Coming off as arrogant, meaning I'm knowing or pretending to know things that I can't actually know. So this type of humility, this type of intellectual humility, is really what we get when we're embedded in scientific skepticism as a mindset. We're willing to be wrong. We're willing to say, I don't know. I have students a lot of times in my classes who will ask great questions that I don't know the answer to. And as a scientific skeptic, I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay with saying, I don't know. Like, that's a great question. Why don't we try and figure it out? Why don't we try and find that information? Now, how many of you had a teacher in the past that you're pretty sure was just making shit up? Like, there was a good question, and they were like, blah, 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 blah. Instead of just saying, I don't know, right? Why is it so hard to say, I don't know? Well, because for a lot of people, they don't want to admit to this kind of intellectual humility, right? I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. And I'm okay with that. And if I'm not sure, I'll tell you that too. Say, well, this is kind of what I think, but I don't really know for sure. And this kind of a mindset, this willingness to say I don't know, right? To not have an answer to everything. This is the scientific mindset, right? This is the skeptical mindset. And this is the intellectually humble mindset. One of my favorite authors, Isaac Asimov, who I'm sure a number of you know, or maybe you've seen the Apple TV Foundation show adapted from his works, said, inspect every piece of pseudoscience, and you'll find a security blanket, a thumb to suck, a skirt to hold. What does the scientist have to offer in exchange? Uncertainty, insecurity. When I think about why so many people hold beliefs and are embedded in belief systems that really don't hold up to scrutiny, I think about Asimov's quote here. And I think about Linus and his security blanket, where it doesn't really do anything for you, but it makes you feel better. You know, there's no magical aura around that blanket that's really protecting it. Thinking that, you know, my actions are having an outsized influence because I'm praying to a particular deity. Thinking that my magic crystal that I bought from my hippie shop is gonna, you know, cure my rheumatism. Not gonna work, right? Why, though? Why do we see these things? We see them because people get something from them that they often don't from quote-unquote science, from a more quote-unquote skeptical viewpoint, which is comfort. That's one of the things that I love about the Oasis groups, actually, is that you do that, right? Why are you all here? You're all here, if I had to guess, for each other, for community, right? To make a difference, right? To help each other out. But you're not doing it because you think there's something, you know, way down the road that you might get or not get. You're saying, I've got that uncertainty and I'm okay with it, which is a good scientific skeptical mindset. I'm okay with not knowing. I'm okay with doing something just to do it. I'm okay with saying I don't know, which a lot of people, it turns out, are not. They like to pretend to know things that they actually don't know for sure, or think that they're much more certain of something than they actually are. And so that's why, to me, I think that humility truly, in terms of intellectual humility, is a key skeptical virtue. It is a key virtue that, as a good scientist myself, I try to display in my scientific work, in my teaching, in my research, in my activism, and in my daily life. Like being willing to say, I'm not sure, or I could be wrong. And when we're okay with displaying that, it turns out it makes it easier for others to display that around us. Because if you're around people all the time that are constantly saying, I know this, I know this, I know this, I'm 100% certain, then you start drifting towards that too. Instead of staying more in a, shall we say, skeptical humility kind of mindset. And so the humble skeptic, as opposed to the arrogant, as opposed to the cynical skeptic, is okay with ambiguity. You're okay with uncertainty. You're okay with not knowing for sure. Like I mentioned earlier, one of my major populations that I work with are people who have severe anxiety disorders. And underlying most of those is this issue that we call intolerance of uncertainty, where I have a really big problem with not knowing for sure. And so one of the things that I help my patients develop is tolerance of uncertainty. And I think we as a culture, we as a humanity, need a lot more of that, it turns out. We need a lot less of that certainty without evidence. Certainty without facts to back it up. And instead, the humble skeptic, the good scientific skeptic's okay with that, right? We're fine with not having certainty. When my patients come to me and they say, can you help me? I don't say 100%. Like, yep. Why? Well, because I know the research, right? I say, well, there's, depending on the problem, 80, 90% chance we can reduce your symptoms by at least 50% within this amount of time. I don't give guarantees because life doesn't have guarantees. And if we start developing that kind of a mindset, we start tolerating that uncertainty, it becomes much more easy to live your life. Because then when something goes awry, you're like, it's okay, right? Like, I didn't know that for 100% sure that was going to happen, so I can tolerate that much easier. You also recognize the limits of your knowledge. Like, I know, it turns out, a lot about psychology. I've been studying psychology for like 25 years. But there's a lot of areas of psychology I don't know much at all about. And so if someone asks me about, let's say, visual processing, I'll be like, yeah, it happens with your eyes and your brain. Pretty sure it's hitting that occipital lobe back there. They said, tell me more. And I said, I already gave you everything I know. Like, that's it. You'll have to go to somebody else. I'm not going to pretend and make things up and be like, oh, well, it turns out the fliggledy-boop over here in the right anterior forceps is really what we call integrationism. No, like, I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, right? Like, I acknowledge the limits of my knowledge. And I think if all of us did that, we'd be much better off as a society. Because how many of you know these, again, arrogant, right, skeptical, quote unquote, people who would never do that, who would never say, I don't know, I'm not sure. Most of us do, right? Many of us have had people in our lives like that. So again, the humble skeptic is okay with saying, I don't know. I'm not sure. Let's find out, right? Let's find out. Let's figure it out. One of my students comes to me with a great question, and I say, I don't know, and we look, and we're like, oh, I don't know. Nobody's really looking at that. Turns out we can do some research on it, right? Like, turns out, let's figure it out. Right? Let's plan a study about that. As opposed to saying, well, I don't know, but let me make some things up and pretend, which is all too often what we see in so many areas of life, from all sorts of things. So all this means that the humble skeptic, scientific skeptic, is willing to change their beliefs. They're willing to admit that they're wrong. Now, I don't know how many of you remember all of the kind of the brouhaha with flip-flopping in the political world with John Kerry. Do you guys remember that? Where he was, there was all these accusations labeled against him when he was running for president. He was a flip-flopper. He changed his mind. He changed how he viewed things. Good. That's what we should do, it turns out, if we're proven to be wrong. That's not a negative. It's not a negative to change your beliefs if there's good evidence to do so. Now, we also do have all those people, many of whom we know, who just change their beliefs all the time without any evidence, right? Who, let's say, maybe are a little more gullible, a little more prone to just believing anything that someone waves in front of them. We know those folks too, right? That's not great. They need to be demanding more evidence for those claims. But a good scientific skeptic should be willing to change their beliefs, change what it is that they're looking at when presented with good evidence. Now, the non-humble skeptic, on the other hand, these are the folks that we, often argue with online or sometimes in person, who they live in these echo chambers. I get all my information from one source and one source only. I only believe the things that this particular source tells me. And they're really guilty of what we call the disconfirmation. If anything goes against what I believe, I automatically discount it. Right? I ignore it. I forget it very quickly, as opposed to saying, okay, well, that's what you said. Let me see what there is to that. I think that vaccines cause autism. They say to me, and I say, well, turns out we have a lot of evidence showing that they don't. And here it is. Now, someone who is a non-humble skeptic, right, in this echo chamber, they're going to immediately discount that. They're like, okay, sure. You had this study in Europe that had literally 3.4 million children in it that showed zero relationship. But anyway, I don't care because my personal belief or my experience trumps your evidence. So they don't change their beliefs when presented with better information. They just stick with those beliefs. And this is what we call this pathological skepticism. Right? They're not a scientific skeptic. They're a cynic. They're a denier. But unfortunately, this is all too often what the scientific skeptics are associated with. Right? And a lot of people conflate these. Again, a lot of times when I do debates with folks, religious folks in particular, people will come up to me and be like, well, you seem really nice. You're a nice person. Surprised, right? Because, I'm this dirty heathen who must be a terrible human being, and that's the only reason that you're, non-religious. No, they're painting me with this kind of a picture, though, in their mind. And a lot of us get that with our family. Maybe we get it at work, where they're seeing us as this kind of pathological skeptic. So that's why it's especially important for us to model good scientific skepticism, which includes intellectual humility. And again, it's this balancing act. It's this balancing act between closeness and openness, between willing to change my beliefs, but demanding evidence for those same beliefs. But it also means we're willing to examine ourselves and look at our own biases and whether or not the beliefs that we're holding really do stand up to that good scrutiny. Because all of us have biases. Everybody does. We're all swimming in them, and that's completely natural, and that's completely okay. But we need to examine which ones I hold. Which ones am I holding? How are those perhaps influencing my beliefs? How are they maybe changing how I'm viewing or not viewing evidence that's presented to me? And being able to, again, adopt this kind of intellectual humility. I refer to it as arrogance control. Right? It really does put the reins on arrogance when you know that, hey, I don't know everything and I could be wrong. And I'll just kind of leave with a quote from Carl Sagan about that, which is, science demands a terrible price, that we accept what experiments tell us about the universe, whether we like it or not. It requires that we utter frequently those hateful words, I might be wrong. And that's what we all have to do, it turns out. We all have to recognize, I might be wrong. We have to keep a rein on that arrogance, or otherwise we slip into that pathological skepticism. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Ted.
Thank you so much, Caleb. Appreciated that. We're going to take a little coffee break now, and then afterwards, I guess we'll have a little Q&A. Caleb, okay. And we'll also have a little presentation from Paige, a little 5-minute presentation. And I'd also like to suggest that in the spirit of today's highlighted core value, that when we're during a coffee break, if you see someone that you haven't met before, consider going up and introducing yourself.
Testing. Better.
Look at me, coyote. Don't let a little road dust put you off. You can't judge a book. Well, you know that stuff. There's a tear in my upholstery and a hole in my shoe. Don't you just wish that you could make half the speed I do? Speed I do, speed I do, speed I do. catch me, coyote. Oh, there may be blood on the track. Maybe some bridges burning behind our back. Poured out all my laundry on the back seat, then itinerary too. Just wish you could make half the speed I do. 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 Now I'm a speck on your horizon, getting smaller fast. An ambush wouldn't be surprising. I hope it's better than your last. Once again, a road runner leaves a coyote in the dirt. You got another plan of action, but we all know it ain't never gonna work. It must be hard having dog dreams that never come true. Don't you just wish that you could make half the speed I do? Speed I do, speed I do, speed I do. Speed I do, speed I do, speed I do. thunderhead by she lightning on the plains been coming down so long. Used to rain. Time that it takes to get the story straight. Storm done come and gone. It's too late. What part of gone? Don't you get? I'm going back to show man.
Test, 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 test.
Tornado cloud, green and black. Since I've been gone, you don't want me back. Just take my shoes, goodwill. I won't be needing any help. There is a thunderhead up on the bayou. He lightning, salt marsh plain, we always knew I'd come back. Even you.
Okay, if we could start heading back to our seats, we'll get started. Wondering if those speakers there are affecting the feedback to the microphone. And you know,
Three dents are spinning out, staggering in the square. Slats rats fall about and a crackling in the air. Then around the dungeon doors, the shutters and the keys. Everybody's looking for somebody's arms. I'm telling the story. Frost on the graves and the monuments, but the taverns are warm in town. People curse the government and show lights are out in City Hall, the castle and the moon shines down upon it all. The lyrics and the spirit hold on to a gate with the wagons creeping through.
okay, we're gonna get started here. Please have a seat, and we'll have a song from Hank Woji.
Oh, it's on me. All right, so I'm going to kick things off here with another song from the record. This is the
It's the title track. The record's called Highways, Gamblers, Devils, and Dreams. Basically, it's been very challenging the last 8 or 10 years here for most of us. And it covers themes from life and death and love and hope. And this is a song of second chances and redemption. I'll be leaving in the morning, westward bound, I'm sure you know. There ain't much time left for talking, so honey, do you want to go? Some say the highway is for gamblers, so let's roll those dice one more time. This road, it won't go on forever, but it might just last a good long ride. So don't look back, it's just a pocket full of roses. Don't look back, it's just a fistful of thorns. Don't look back, broken hearts will all be mended. Don't look back, broken spirits be reborn. Now there's no chance in taking chances. There's no dream that can't be dreamed. In a world so unexpected, won't you take a chance on me? 'Cause we've seen enough to know better. Thrown all caution to the wind. We've tasted sweet wine and the bitter fruit. Lost enough times to know what it really means to win. So don't look back, it's just a pocket full of roses. Don't look back, it's just a fistful of thorns. Don't look back, broken hearts will all be mended. Don't look back, broken spirits be reborn. I'll be leaving in the morning, westward bound, I'm sure you know. There ain't much time left for talking, so honey, do you wanna go? Don't look back, it's just a pocket full of roses. Don't look back, it's just a fistful of thorns. Don't look back, Broken hearts will all be mended. Don't look back, broken spirits be reborn.
Thank you, Hank. Before we get started with the Q&A, I'd just like to make a quick plug for Houston Oasis financial donations. We pay $400 a week for this facility, plus musicians and speakers. So if you're able, there's a donation table in the back with a little black hat, and you can also pay with online capabilities there. So I guess we're ready for Q&A with Mr. Lack. And so we got a microphone here, and if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand and Jacob will bring the microphone to you.
I will be answering all questions in the form of a riddle and a song. So just so you know, they have to be good ones. Just kidding.
I'll go ahead and break the ice on the questions. What would you say about appropriately skeptical questioning as a good middle ground? Like, not on one end you have the change my mind statement, which is ironic, versus way on the other side, the Joe Rogan type, someone says something bat crap insane and it goes unchallenged. What would you say is like the happy medium?
A medium there. So when I'm talking to someone who has a belief that I'm relatively certain isn't based in evidence and reason, what I usually go for first is trying to understand, why do they hold that belief? Because no one believes things without any reason. No one just wakes up one day and it's just like, you know what, I'll just believe this. Where are they getting that belief from? Because if you understand why someone holds a belief, then you can start to ask them more about it. Some of you may be familiar with Socratic questioning, right? A lot of attention, probably in the last 10 years, have been given to using that in terms of what has been termed by Pete Boghossian as street epistemology. I don't know if any of you have heard that term or not before. But the entire point of that is actually to get people to elucidate what it is and why it is that they believe. Because if you just start arguing with somebody and saying, like, you're wrong, right? Like, you're wrong because of this. Your belief is wrong and dumb like that. What happens is they put barriers up and they immediately discount anything. So the very first step is saying, oh, here's what it is. Here's what you're telling me. Let me understand that. And then being able to say that back to them shows that I'm listening. Right? That I hear them, that I get and I understand where they're coming from. And then, if you really want to have a good conversation, your next step is to say, here's where we agree. Here's any point that we can find that I agree with you on. So I get a lot of questions in a lot of venues from vaccine denialists, right? So with the COVID-19 vaccines, for example, you know, obviously that blew up. Before that, it was people thinking the vaccines cause things like autism. And, you know, I, as a good scientist, as someone who clearly believes vaccines are the way, because they save millions of lives, I don't just automatically be like, well, you're stupid and you're gonna die, right? Or something like that. So where would I find common ground with someone like that? Well, we're both concerned about health. We're both concerned about well-being. Like, a lot of times we're concerned about the health of our children, right? So that's our common ground. Like, you're really concerned that you don't want to do something that's going to harm yourself, harm your kids, harm X or Y. Turns out I'm really concerned with that too. Here's though, now that I found a common ground, here's where we differ, right? I'm more concerned with what's going to happen from not actually using these vaccines that are shown to have clinical efficacy and safety. So now you now get to tell me why you think I'm wrong, right? So that it becomes this back and forth interplay as opposed to just the, you're wrong. And then, now we're all angry at each other. So did that answer your question, Jay?
Yes.
Okay.
Looks like that's, sorry about that. Looks like that's all the time we had for, oh, we have one more. She'll be our last question.
Okay, so say somebody has I guess I want to say that we all have to have like some faith in that the research or whatever that was done where we come to our conclusion is like complete, and there's no way to guarantee that, I guess, because so how do you, I don't know, how do you ever say that I've really, done the research completely?
Yeah. So the analogy I often use is I ask people how many times have they ever driven over a bridge before? Has anybody ever driven over a bridge? We went to the Johnson Space Center yesterday. There were many bridges that I drove over on the way there. I'm not an engineer, right? I trusted those bridges to hold me and the apparently billions of other cars that are in Houston up, right? Why? Well, because I trusted those people to do their job and to do their job well, and then also that there are outside checks on them, right? So it wasn't just somebody who was like, you know what, I think I'll build a bridge here. Like, we have regulations in place, we have safety mechanisms in place so that we know, like, this is a safe bridge. And a lot of times in terms of research and science, people don't have that same trust in researchers and scientists. And we see people do a lot more questioning of that, even if they don't know anything about that area. Like, I don't know anything about engineering, right? Like, if I built a bridge, I would not want any of you to drive over it. Like, I would not, right? I'd be like, I built one. I don't know why I did, but I don't recommend anyone use this. In the same sort of vein, what we have to do is we actually have to have appropriate levels of trust in people who are trained and knowledgeable in these different scientific fields, right? So my best friend is a molecular biologist, right? And he knows way more than I do about those things. So when he starts telling me about some of his research, I'm like, I know like half those words, but I trust that you know what you're doing because of his background, right? Because of his training. But what we see and increasingly have seen over the last about 25 years is this distrust in authority in certain areas, and most of those being in medicine and science. And those of us who are healthcare practitioners, who are scientists ourselves, we know that the science is never finished. Right? We understand and we recognize that the study's gonna say this, and then here a little bit later, may find out that's not true. And that's okay. That's part of this skepticism process. That's part of the scientific process. But the general public oftentimes sees that as being wishy-washy. Right? They're like, oh, they said eggs are bad for you. Now they're saying eggs are good. Now they're saying the white part of eggs is bad, but the yellow part's good, or vice versa. And they're like, well, so what should we do? I guess we just burn all the chickens. It's like, I don't think that's the right option, right? Like, science is self-correcting. It turns out that's the key mechanism of science. And I think if more of the public understood that mechanism of correction and how that takes place, we'd start seeing that trust built back up, where people do less questioning of, again, appropriate good research. Because there's a lot of bad research out there that's really easy to get published and put out there online. So, just leave it there.
Thank you. We have a short message from Paige here. And thank you for Dr. Lack for the Q&A there.
Okay, I think this is the right place for it. Can you understand me? I just wanted to read to you a letter that I had in today's Chronicle, and it's not just an ego trip. I'm hoping to inspire some of you to express yourselves more about what's going on in the world, and that we are not evil people because we are not religious. So this is what they wrote that I sent into the Chronicle about the week's events. Nauseating is my best description of your front page story about our governor ordering his troopers to push small children and nursing babies back into the Rio Grande and to deny water to asylum seekers in this dangerous heat wave. Is this what our governor's Jesus would do? It's not a very good ad for Christianity. No wonder an increasing number of people, including myself, are turning away from religion. Humanists would never be so inhumane. So I hope you all will send things like that to the paper and say things like that to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. And one last song from Mr. Hank Woji.
So anyway, I guess most of you have seen that the actors union have joined the writers on the picket lines, and pretty soon the pipeline's going to dry up. So maybe people will begin to notice what this fight is all about. I'm a union member, musicians union, and I sincerely hope that the musicians will get involved as well. And I'll tell you why. People come up to me all the time. I just spent 3 years finishing a recording project, and the CD will come out in September. And I used to make a little money from CDs. I know a lot of you don't have CD players anymore, and that's technology moves on. But I used to make money from downloads. So if someone bought a CD from me, I would make $15, which is not the profit, that's the gross. If somebody downloaded the CD, I'd get $9. They pay 10, I'd get 9. And if somebody downloaded a single song, like if you heard one of my songs today that you liked and you went on to one of the streaming services at the time, like CD Baby, and you downloaded that song, you'd pay $1 and you'd have that song forever. You listen to it as many times as you want. And I would get about 75 or 80 cents out of that $1. Now streaming has come in. To be very honest with you, streaming music is stealing music. Every time you stream a song of mine, I make 1/100th of 1 penny. You have to stream my song 1,000 times for me to make a penny. People have to stream one of my songs 10,000 times for me to make $1. So the world has changed, and I think artists are being taken advantage of. We have been taken advantage of, particularly over the last 20 years. And so now we're left to our own devices. And I encourage you to not stream music, to actually buy the music from the artists. You can go on our websites and you can download the song, buy the CD. If you like the music, enjoy it, compensate the artists for it, because we work real hard. So I'm going to leave you with the last, thank you. I'm going to leave you with the last song from the record. Just a little prayer of farewell. Peace unto you till we meet again. Gone on our ways, spirits in the wind. Peace unto you, you may roam. Long winding road, surely bring you home. Peace unto you, brush away your tears, trusting in love, drive away your fears. Peace unto you, not the only one. Dark be the hour, dawn is soon to come. Shine on, keep shining your golden light. Guide us to safer shores. Shine on, keep shining long through the night. Further on, further on. Peace unto you, leave the past behind. Rise with the dawn to say our last goodbyes. Peace unto you, till we meet again. Gone on our ways, spirits in the wind. Thank you very much.
Thanks for educating us on the streaming music scene. I think that was good for everybody. And we will have lunch at 5711 Hillcroft. That is straight up here, and but it wasn't working. Oh, I guess it is now. Okay. I was kind of enjoying that. Straight up Hillcroft, and right after Harwin, take a right into the Plaza Shopping Center. It's the Saffron Kebab Restaurant, specializes in Middle Eastern food, and we've never been there before, but it should be good. And have a great week. I think that's all. Thank you.